The unsurpassed, penetrating, and perfect truth is seldom met with, even in 100,000 myriad kalpas. Now we can see and hear it, we can remember and accept it. I vow to make the Buddha's truth one with myself. Homage to the Buddha, homage to the Dharma, homage to the Sangha. Good morning. When was today's talk, I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself. Today's talk is going to be on Shanti Paramita, or the perfection of patience, and the third of the four wisdoms, which is benevolence. So when was the last time you stood in a long line or participated in a traffic jam? We all have myriad opportunities to practice patience. And how do we respond? The 8th century Indian master Shantideva says, "No evil is there similar to anger, no austerity to be compared with patience. Steep yourself, therefore, in patience, in various ways, insistently." An interesting combination of insistence and patience, but steep yourself in patience in various ways, insistently. Those tormented by the pain of anger never know tranquility of mind. Strangers they will be to every pleasure. They will neither sleep nor feel secure. These verses come near the beginning of the chapter on patience in The Way of the Bodhisattva, which has inspired much of this talk. Shantideva spends much of this chapter talking about anger, describing many possible sources of it, urging us to be still with such things as physical pain, disrespect, assault, insect bites, weather conditions, and other things that can provoke our impatience and anger. The Sanskrit word shanti is translated as patience, forbearance, tolerance. To forbear is to hold oneself back from. Another way of saying practice restraint. Someone says something mean or nasty to you. Forbearance is to remain still and silent rather than say something nasty back to them or about them. Patience, forbearance, and tolerance require effort, and that's the 4th paramita. We'll talk about that tomorrow. And a benevolent attitude of mind. That's the 3rd of the 4 wisdoms, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. I see patience as related to all acceptance, which Reverend Master Jiyu called the key that unlocks the gateless gate. This is how it is. Now, what am I going to do with it? Traditional teachings state 3 common circumstances in which we can practice patience. In times of personal hardship, in human relations, that is, mental or physical injuries by others, and last, facing the uncomfortable truths about life. Sickness, old age, disease, and death, impermanence, and change. So we'll talk about the first situation, which is practicing patience or practicing tolerance for discomfort and personal hardship. This retreat, I'm sure, offers plenty of opportunity to practice tolerance for discomfort. Have you ever sat through a meditation period wondering, when will the bell go? Waiting for it, hoping for it, praying for it. Or, my left eyelid itches, but I don't want to scratch it and disturb the person next to me. Meditation retreats are a great opportunity to practice patience. We start small where we are and practice being patient with the itch on the eyelid. We start small, and our patience grows stronger through practice. Here's Shantideva again. There's nothing that does not grow light through habit and familiarity. Putting up with little cares, I'll train myself to bear with great adversity. So we start small and grow stronger through practice. Shantideva's text goes on to name some of the little things when we can practice patience: insect bites, hunger, thirst, painful skin rashes. Of course, he doesn't mention waiting in line at the supermarket, and I'm sure you can add many instances of personal hardship, great and small, from your own experience. It's helpful in this circumstance to recall the first noble truth, that suffering is a part of life. We can't change that, and we can't really avoid it, but we can train ourselves to sit still through it. Sitting still means letting go of the negative thoughts that arise, and it means accepting complete responsibility for them. Because it's our unskillful reactions to people and circumstances, our own thoughts and emotions, that cause our problems, not the people and circumstances. Back to that meditation period where you can't wait until the bell rings, but you do. One recent day, I suspected that the monk leading the meditation period had lost track of the time, and that we'd been sitting way longer than we should have. All kinds of thoughts followed on that. Well, then what time will breakfast be? What time will such and such be? What will we do about the rest of the day? I was sitting here for an hour and a half, I'm sure. I could just barely see the monk, and I kept waiting for him to move toward the bell, but he didn't. Should I check my watch, I wonder? This was during the morning meditation period, which to me can seem very long. Although I wasn't angry at the monk himself, I was certainly frustrated at the slow passing of time. Fortunately, sitting on my seat in the meditation hall reminded me that my job was just sitting with no deliberate thought, and I was able to sit out the rest of the period in peace. And no, the monk hadn't lost track of the time. This is a common scenario for me, and it allows me to practice patience in a benign and controlled setting, so that when true misfortune strikes, I have that practice to rely on. I'll turn again to Shantideva's advice on dealing with hardship and difficulty, and this is one of my favorites. If there's a remedy when trouble strikes, what reason is there for dejection? And if there is no help for it, what use is there in being glum? That verse has inspired me to start asking when there's a problem, is there something that can be done or not? If so, do it. If not, carry on. Either I can do something about it or not. So either way, why get upset? The second type of situation, practicing patience and forbearance in human relations. Most of the focus here is on dealing with anger. And I've brought a dramatic example of this, of the Buddha's teaching on this, from the Pali Canon, which is the first recorded teachings of the Buddha. So here's the Buddha speaking to his followers. Even if bandits were to carve you up savagely, limb by limb, with a two-handled saw, he among you who let his heart get angered, even at that, would not be doing my bidding. Even then, you should train yourselves like this. Our minds will be unaffected, and we will say no evil words, no cursing. We will remain sympathetic with a mind of goodwill and with no inner hate. We will keep pervading these people with an awareness imbued with goodwill. And beginning with them, we will keep pervading the all-encompassing world with an awareness imbued with goodwill, abundant, expansive, immeasurable, free from hostility, free from ill will. That's how you should train yourselves. No small order there. And the Buddha goes on to ask his followers a question. If you attend constantly to this admonition on the simile of the saw, do you see any aspects of speech, slight or gross, that you could not endure? And they all answer, no, Lord. I like that question at the end. Is there any kind of speech that would be worse to receive than being sawn limb from limb? And I sometimes wonder whether the Buddha had a wicked sense of humor. Now, this is an extreme example, and as I hope I've gotten across, we start where we are and go on from there. The important part is the going on. In pre-conversion days, shortly before coming to the monastery, I worked in a law firm. One of my co-workers had the habit of always greeting everyone with a cheery smile and, "How are you this morning?" This was certainly not insulting, disrespectful, or slanderous, and it was far from the two-handled saw. However, as I said, it was pre-conversion days. I didn't want to know how anyone else was, and I didn't want to tell them how I was. I just wanted to get on with my work. But I was sensible enough to realize that my co-worker's speech was simply a conventional social greeting, and I was civilized enough to give the conventional answer and get on with my day. With years of practice, I can now see that person's kind heart, and I would wish to answer from a kind heart of my own. These are all transformative practices. Back to Shantideva. So, like a treasure found at home that I have gained without fatigue, my enemies are helpers in my Bodhisattva work, and therefore they should be a joy to me. And you can take the word enemies to mean whoever is irritating to you at the moment. Since I have grown in patience thanks to them its first fruits I should give, for of my patience they have been the cause. So that's turning it around to see a person who irritates you, or worse, as the cause of goodness, the development of patience. Of course, a friendly morning greeting carries no harm, and the person concerned couldn't be considered an enemy. What about someone who does something truly harmful to oneself or to others? Reverend Master taught that there are bodhisattvas who teach us what to do and bodhisattvas who teach us what not to do. One thing that never helps is blame. Casting blame befuddles the mind and obstructs clear thinking. It's one thing to assign responsibility, and it's sometimes helpful. If it was Joe Bloggs who caused the car crash, then he should pay for the damages. But blame is never helpful. In cases such as social injustice, we may need to take an active part in not going along with it. That's where our meditation and wise discernment come in. But that's not the same as blame. We may think blame is helpful because it helps us to feel better when we're angry. We can say, "Look what you made me do." As we cultivate our patience, we grow better able to tolerate insults and such from others. Like blame, defensiveness isn't helpful either. Say someone criticizes or blames me for something. In the past, I might have lied to say that I didn't do it when I did. Or I might have insisted on proving that it wasn't my fault, even to the point of screaming and cursing at the person. This practice has helped me learn, when receiving blame or criticism, to accept it with gratitude and apologize for any wrongdoing. If it's true, the thing I'm being blamed for, if it's true that I was responsible for it, to work on doing better next time. If it's untrue, to realize that my critic is human just like me and may be wrong, without making an issue of it. Forbearance when we're right is one of the hardest times of all to practice patience. The traditional teaching in Buddhism is that we can't blame others or circumstances for our troubles because they are caused by our own past actions. If someone harms me, it's because I've harmed someone in the past, maybe even in another lifetime. This is the law of karma. And this makes good sense to me, and it is helpful in eliminating the basis for blame. What I know is true is that other people and circumstances are not the cause of my problems or my anger. The cause is my own unskillful reactions to the people and circumstances. I want to mention briefly the moral question of how does patience or tolerance work in the case of injustice. My master taught that just because you're a Buddhist, that doesn't mean you have to be a doormat. In fact, it's a good idea not to be a doormat. His Holiness the Dalai Lama advises that tolerance should not be confused with mere passivity. On the contrary, he says, adopting even vigorous countermeasures may be compatible with tolerance. There are times in everyone's life when harsh words or even physical intervention may be called for. But since it safeguards our inner composure, tolerance means we are in a stronger position to judge an appropriately nonviolent response than if we are overwhelmed by negative thoughts and emotions. From this, we see that it is the very opposite of cowardice. Most Buddhist sources that I've read state that although force may sometimes be necessary, anger is never appropriate. I try to remember that when swatting at the mosquitoes that come around. I want to drive them off, but not with an attitude of hatred. I know how it feels to be hungry. Tokme Zongpo, a 13th century Tibetan Buddhist Lama, says, "For bodhisattvas who wish to be rich in virtue, a person who hurts you is a precious treasure. Cultivate patience for everyone without irritation or resentment. This is the practice of a bodhisattva." So the third type of situation, tolerance of the truth about ourselves and the world. The Four Noble Truths are basic to all the Buddha's teaching, and the first one is the truth of suffering. Suffering exists. Birth is suffering, sickness is suffering, old age is suffering. Not getting what we want is suffering. Getting what we don't want is suffering, and death is suffering. Every being who is born will die. Our loved ones will die, and then we ourselves will die. The third noble truth is the cessation of suffering. In the mind of the bodhisattva who is truly one with great wisdom, the obstacles dissolve. And going on beyond this human mind, he is nirvana. For me, Part of the remedy for this knowledge of suffering is to look at a bigger picture, opening the mind to seeing things as they really are, whether I like it or not. We can take it on faith. We can partially understand what it says in the scripture of great wisdom, "Here all things are pure," or in another translation, "All things are defined by emptiness." Words are insufficient. In place of emptiness, Reverend Master used words such as void, unstained, immaculate, and pure. Whatever inadequate word we use points to the same thing, that nothing has a permanent, independent, unchanging self or essence. We're not alone in this. Everything, including ourselves and all beings, everything is part of a ceaseless, interconnected, passing, changing flow of existence. And this is somehow helpful, even as I don't understand it. As one author states, this far-reaching truth cannot be comprehensively grasped. But just taking it in and sitting with it helps us. Sometimes in the evening, I gaze out into the universe and take comfort in its boundlessness. The perfection of tolerance, the teachings say, is when we can understand the emptiness of all things, including and especially ourselves, without fear. Now we'll turn to the third of the four wisdoms, which is benevolence. That's also been translated as beneficial action. Benevolence means goodwill. Thanissaro Bhikkhu, a Western monk in the Theravada Buddhist tradition, has defined the term metta as goodwill. Although metta is usually translated as loving kindness, I was happy to hear it defined as goodwill. There's nothing wrong with loving kindness, but the word love has been overworked in popular culture until it means almost nothing to me anymore. However, goodwill makes a lot of sense, and that's something I can aspire to. In the Shobogenzo, in the chapter on the Bodhisattva's four methods of guidance, that's another translation of the four wisdoms, Great Master Dogen says, showing benevolence means working out skillful methods by which to benefit sentient beings, be they of high or low station. Someone once took pity on a stricken turtle, and another once tended to a sick sparrow. Neither of these people was seeking reward. They simply acted from a feeling of benevolence. And that harkens back to the teaching on generosity, that bodhisattvas should practice generosity without seeking any reward. So they simply acted from a feeling of benevolence. And I don't know any Asian languages, but I wonder if aspiration might fit in as feeling of benevolence could be aspiration of benevolence. The point is, it isn't necessary to particularly feel benevolent in order to practice benevolence. We learn through doing. Some people may foolishly think, goes on Great Master Dogen, some people may foolishly think that if they were to put the welfare of others first, their own benefits would be reduced. This is not so. Benevolence is all-encompassing, universally benefiting both self and others. So we should act to benefit equally, both those who are hostile and those who are friendly, and act for the benefit of both self and other alike. This doesn't exclude ourselves. When we attain such an attitude of mind, Our showing of benevolence will neither retreat nor turn away from anything. And this benevolence will be shown even towards grass and trees, wind and water. And in all humility, we should engage ourselves in helping those who are given to foolishness. That was Reverend Master Hubert Neerman's translation in Shobogenzo, the chapter Bodhisattva Shishobo. Gudo Nishijima and Chodo Cross have translated the term for benevolence as helpful conduct. And in their translation, they state, helpful conduct is the whole Dharma. Helpful conduct is the whole Dharma. Take a minute to think about that. When you pour out the vegetable washing water on a tree, when you open or close the door for somebody whose arms are full, when you clean the sinks and counters, whatever you do with a mind of goodwill, you're expressing the whole of the Dharma. I mentioned learning as much from seeing my master drink a cup of tea as from a Dharma talk. The whole purpose of this retreat is to show how we can practice the Dharma in every activity of our daily lives, wherever we are and whoever we are. If you're with us long enough, you'll notice that we take insects from the temple rooms and gently place them outdoors. We did the same thing with a snake once that a cat had brought in. It was a non-venomous snake, and it survived both the cat's efforts and our own. Although I wasn't the one to actually take the snake in hand and remove it, I helped out in whatever way I could, thus proving that benevolence won't turn away from anything. Snakes have been the terror of my life. And when we offer merit for the victim of, say, a mass shooting, we offer merit to the perpetrator as well, who is likely to need it more than anyone. Reverend Master Jiyu taught benevolence as a law of the universe. Evil is vanquished and good prevails. This can be hard to see when looking with the ordinary mind, and it's something I've now and then put on the back burner. That is, a teaching that I may not have understood well enough yet, and I want to simmer it a while longer. When sitting still in your true heart, your true nature, you can look with the eyes of Buddha and see the heart of Buddha. We do bad things to beings who look or act differently from ourselves, but maybe we've grown a little gentler over the ages. We no longer burn witches, for example. Right now, we're living through a time of much hatred in the world, but even so, we can always find examples of helpful conduct. In looking at the Good News Network online recently, I learned that 84-year-old Nitsa Michael closed her seaside hotel in England to tourists and took in Ukrainian refugees in their place. And not only took them in, but made a home for them and their dogs and everyone else. So I'm going to close with this verse from Shantideva. If the simple thought to be of help to others exceeds in worth the worship of the Buddhas, what need is there to speak of actual deeds that bring about the benefit of beings? And I'll leave you with that encouragement and look forward to hearing from you this afternoon. Homage to all the Buddhas in all worlds. Homage to all the Bodhisattvas in all worlds. Homage to the scripture of great wisdom.